"One human," my attaché said, and she said it the way you would say the building is on fire. With that particular stillness that comes from delivering news you already know will cause a reaction you would rather not witness up close. I was shaking the Torathi ambassador's fourth hand. We have a saying among Velkari diplomats: your face is not yours, it belongs to the work. I kept it where it belonged. I smiled. I said the correct words in the correct sequence. Velsari waited. "One," she said again, because she apparently felt that repetition would be useful. It was not useful. The reception hall around us was doing what reception halls always do during gatherings of this kind. 43 species in formal dress, performing the ancient theater of introductions. Music playing at a pitch that was technically inoffensive to the majority of registered auditory systems in the room, which is the most any diplomatic reception can honestly claim. Servers threading trays through the crowd with refreshments that most guests could technically consume without consequence. The smell of 4 different atmospheric supplements mixing into something that was not quite any of them. I kept the smile in position and thought about the word one. The human coalition had existed as a formal political entity for 17 months. They had arrived at galactic politics the way a guest arrives late to a dinner that has already developed seating arrangements. With energy, with the specific noise of a species that had just discovered it was not alone in the universe, and had decided this was less a discovery and more an opportunity. They wanted a presence at every table. They wanted their name in every formal record. They had decided the best way to accomplish this was to place one of their own at the side of a Velkari diplomat and call it an alliance. One soldier for me. I understood the calculation. The Velkari conclave had been shaping the political structure of the outer reach for 4 centuries. To stand beside us was to announce yourself as serious. To guard us was to say, we belong here, we are capable of this, we exist. I understood it completely. I resented it with an equal completeness. The paperwork arrived that evening after the reception had concluded and I had returned to my suite on the station's 7th residential level. 16 clauses. I read them in order. Then I read them again. I paid particular attention to the language around protective jurisdiction and operational autonomy, which were both phrases that meant the human would be making decisions in my immediate vicinity that I had not been consulted on, within parameters that someone had been very careful to make sound reasonable. The 4th clause contained the name. Sergeant Cale Duran, 7th Diplomatic Protection Corps, Security Clearance Level 6, assigned to the protection of Velkari Empath Diplomat Savak for the duration of the Outer Reach accession talks. I read the 4th clause 5 times. I was reading the clause. I want to be clear about that. I was not reading about the person. I was reading about the legal framework that would place this person in my quarters the following morning, and I was reading with the focused attention of someone looking for an exit that the document's authors had, infuriatingly, not provided. I put the papers on the desk. Pick them up again. Read the 4th clause one more time. Then I placed them face down and attempted sleep. This is the most accurate description of what happened between the hour of midnight and the 7th station hour. I attempted it. My body was horizontal. The lights were appropriately dimmed. All conditions were technically correct. My mind produced the 4th clause repeatedly until something resembling rest occurred, eventually, under considerable protest. Sergeant Cale Duran arrived at precisely the 7th hour. I had built an expectation. Human military personnel at diplomatic functions carry themselves with a visible awareness of being watched. There is always a performance element, a posture that announces, we have arrived, look at what we are. My door opened. Cale Duran walked in, and I revised everything immediately. Medium height, lean in the specific way that comes from long habit rather than deliberate effort, dark hair, cut short, skin the warm brown of worked earth, Eyes that were some color between gray and something the Velkari language does not contain, because we have never needed a word for it. Clothes that were regulation but worn soft from years of consistent use. One sidearm at the hip. One bag over one shoulder. They set the bag down beside the door. Looked at the room. Then looked at me. Diplomat Savak, they said. Sergeant Duran, I said. I did what I have always done when meeting someone new. The reflex of 63 years in this work. I reached, gently, with the part of me that functions somewhere between a sense and a skill, and tried to feel the shape of the person in front of me. Every living creature has an emotional field. Some are broad and warm and easy. Some are compressed into small, careful spaces. Some are complicated enough that I spent years learning the texture of a single species. Kale Duran's was a lake. Still water, no surface disturbance. I reached, and the field gave back only the reflection of my own reaching, the way a very calm surface gives back only the sky above it. I pulled back, faster than was professional. Duran did not acknowledge it, turned and began moving through the room. They checked the windows, methodically, the way someone checks a thing they are paid to check and intend to check thoroughly. Then the door seals. Then the ventilation access panels set into the wall at mid-height. At the second panel they crouched, looked at it for a moment, and then stood and moved on without expression. Is there something wrong with it? I asked. No, they said. Then, standard check, they said, not cutting me off, placing the information down the way you set something on a shelf. When they had finished the full circuit, they faced me. 2 access points need monitoring or sealing, they said. I have already submitted the request to the station coordinator. I looked at them. You arrived 10 minutes ago. I send it from the transport, they said. Nothing in the tone. No awareness that this was, by any measure, an unusual thing to say. Just a fact delivered flat because it was accurate. I turned toward the window. The station's external docks were lit in long silver lines below, ships moving in and out, unhurried as tides. I watched them for a moment. Behind me I heard Duran take their bag into the secondary room. No door closing. The sound of them moving through that space with the same unhurried thoroughness. Learning it, cataloging it. Then quiet. I wrote in my log that the human was competent and appeared to understand the parameters of the assignment, that I anticipated no complications, that the arrangement would function as intended. 63 years of diplomatic reports. I have written through difficult postings, through tense sessions, through moments when the accurate version of events was not a version I was permitted to record. I had never written a log entry that was quite so thoroughly not the truth. The truth was this: I had spent 6 decades reading people, not perfectly, but reliably. I reached for Kale Duran's field and found a lake. Not absence, not blankness, something structured and deep, something that was not concealing itself, something that was simply too far below the surface to catch from a single reach. I sat with that for a long time. In the secondary room, the light went dark. Duran had gone to sleep. Simple, immediate, uncomplicated. I sat in my chair and read the 4th clause one final time. Then I put it down. Did not pick it up again. The Krath arrived on the 14th day of the talks. There were 11 of them in the official delegation, which was 8 more than any negotiation required, and 3 more than the station's security advisory recommended for a species of their physical profile. The Krath Confederacy had a history with the Outer Reach resource corridors that went back 2 centuries before the current treaty framework, and they had arrived with the particular energy of a party that considers itself the most important entity in the room and is waiting for the room to agree. They also had a tradition. Every Velkari diplomat who had operated in contested space knew about it. The Krath called it Vethkaran, the first reading. When a new presence entered a negotiation space, The Krath would locate the most significant figure among the opposing parties, move into close proximity, and hold that proximity, standing, looking, filling the space between them with the particular pressure of their full attention. They did this until the other party flinched. They had never, in documented diplomatic history, failed to produce the flinch. The reception on the 15th day was a formal meet and acknowledge event. Every delegation present for the accession talks in the same hall at the same time, the opening movement of a process that would take weeks. I was there as the Velkari representative on the Resource Rights Subcommittee, which meant I held a vote that 4 different parties wanted to influence, and 2 parties would have preferred to remove from the equation entirely. I was aware of this. I had been in similar positions before, in different rooms with different faces. Durin was at my shoulder, 3 steps back, 1 to the right. They had held this position at every formal event since the first day. I had not requested it. They had found it on the first occasion and kept it every time since. Close enough to reach me in 2 steps. Far enough not to appear to be listening to every exchange I was engaged in. It was, I had come to acknowledge, a precise calculation. The 3 Krath came to me 20 minutes into the event. They did not announce themselves. They materialized. One moment I was speaking with the Torathi Undersecretary about secondary transit rights, and then the conversation had ended in a way I could not identify, and I was looking at the chest of the Krath senior emissary who stood 2 heads above me and was close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from them. 2 more behind them, flanking. The senior emissary smiled. The Krath jaw structure makes smiling look like a threat display. Whether this is intentional is a question I have never received a clear answer to. Diplomat Savak, they said. Their name was Vorith. I had read the file. 3rd-tier emissary, Krath Eastern Confederacy, 3 prior negotiations in the Outer Reach. A record of results that were good for the Krath and complicated for everyone else. A pleasure to meet you in person. Emissary Vorith, I said, welcome to the station. They did not step back. People step back after an initial greeting. It is the acknowledged convention of meeting. Vorith did not step back. The 2 flanking emissaries did not move. This was the Veth Karen. I knew it. I held my posture. The Torathi Undersecretary had found somewhere else to be, which told me something about how visible this was to the rest of the room. I could feel Durin behind me. Not hear them, not see them, but the stillness had a specific shape by now, the absence of unnecessary movement, present, fixed. Vorith began speaking. Pleasantries. The weather on their home world which was not relevant to anything. The progress of preliminary talks which was vague to the point of meaninglessness. The pleasantries were the grammatical structure of a threat wearing formal clothing. Polite, sustained, and going nowhere. Designed to continue until I shifted my weight or glanced toward someone else, or made any of the small involuntary movements that count as a flinch. I did not move. I counted seconds. 1, 2, 3. It is not a comfortable count. There is a specific physical effect to the sustained attention of 3 Krath emissaries at this range. The body registers it and files a strong recommendation about it. 7 seconds. Something changed. I did not see it happen. I heard it in the rhythm of Vorith's sentence. A pause 1 fraction too long. The pleasantries broke briefly, the way a walking pace breaks when a foot catches an unexpected edge and recovers without falling. Vorith's eyes moved. Past me. To the person at my shoulder. I did not turn. I tracked the direction of attention without looking. I had learned to do this over 6 decades. What I could not do was see whatever Vorith was seeing because I was facing the other direction. But I could see Vorith's face. And what moved across it in the space of 4 seconds was something I did not have immediate language for. Not fear. The Krath do not fear in the way that maps onto that word. Something older. something that a species develops over centuries of conflict and survival and long, careful attention to what the world contains that is more dangerous than they are. Recognition. 4 seconds. The Krath moved away. Not quickly, not obviously. They found somewhere else to be smoothly, like a current that has changed direction without announcing the change. I stood in the space where they had been. Nearby, on a refreshment table, a tray of chilled spheres that no one had touched was rocking slightly on the uneven surface. One sphere rolled to the edge, fell, clicked against the floor, sat there. No one picked it up. I turned to Durin. "What did you do?" I said. "Nothing," they said. "They left." "Yes." "Why?" Durin looked at the space where the Krath had been, then back at me. Something passed briefly behind their eyes, not humor exactly, the concept of humor moving through. "They recognized something," Durin said. I waited. "From a distance," they said, "the way you recognize weather before it arrives." "That is not an explanation," I said. "I know," they said, and turned to scan the rest of the room. The music continued. 43 species continued their performances. Everything in the hall proceeded exactly as it had been proceeding. Except that 3 Krath emissaries who had never in recorded history broken the Veth Karen before producing a flinch, had looked at my guard for 4 seconds and chosen to be somewhere else. That night in my quarters I reached again, carefully, just a touch at the surface of the lake. This time I went slightly deeper. And at the bottom, very far down, I found something old, something that had been there long before this assignment, before this station, before whatever series of events had placed Kale Durin in the 7th Diplomatic Protection Corps, and then into my secondary room, cold and weight-bearing. The kind of thing a structure is built around rather than in spite of. A foundation that does not announce itself because it does not need to. I pulled back. I had been filing my Durin observations under one category in my log. I deleted it, created a new one. I called it unclassifiable. Filed everything there. Closed the log. Looked at the ceiling until the station lights dimmed. The attempt came on the 32nd day, at the 3rd station hour. I was awake. Sleep had become a complicated project since the 2nd week of the talks. Too many threads to hold at once. The Resource Rights Subcommittee vote. The secondary transit corridor dispute. The 3 separate parties who had communicated through intermediaries that my vote mattered to them specifically, and in ways they preferred not to formalize. I was reviewing the subcommittee briefing at my desk when Durin appeared in my doorway. Already dressed. This was not unusual. Durin slept in the clothes they wore during the day, which I had noticed and filed under unclassifiable, and which meant they were always technically prepared to move. But the way they were standing in the doorway was different from the way they usually stood in doorways. The difference did not have an obvious name. It was in the position of their weight, the specific quality of their stillness. "Interior room," they said, "now." I looked up. "Now," they said again, the same tone, except that underneath it there was something I caught without reaching for it. I got up. The interior room was the smaller inner chamber. No external walls, no windows. The ventilation access panels in this room were the ones Durin had assessed as satisfactory on the first day. Durin put me in the room, stood in the doorway. "Stay here," they said. "Do not open this door until I open it." I said, "What is?" "Please," Durin said. Something about that word stopped me. Durin did not use please as a social convention. They used words precisely, the way tools are used. The word carried weight when they used it. They meant it. The door closed. I stood in the interior room. On the narrow window shelf, someone had placed a small potted plant, dark green leaves, round-edged, catching the dim light. I did not know why there was a plant. I had not requested one. I counted the leaves. 11. The sounds began approximately 3 minutes after the door closed. I will not reconstruct them in detail here. I tried once in my log and deleted it. What I will say is this: what was happening on the other side of that door was not brief. It was not clean. It was not a thing that ended quickly and resolved neatly. It was extended and deliberate, and it went on for a long time, and I stood in the interior room and counted 11 leaves and recounted them from the opposite side and arrived at the same number and counted them again. At around the 6th minute, the sound stopped. I stood very still. They resumed, shorter, more focused. Then quiet. Then a long silence that pressed against the door from the outside, like something waiting to be named. I counted the leaves. 11. The door opened at the 38th minute. Cale Duran stood in the frame. There was a cut above their left eye. Their shirt was not recoverable. Their breathing was slightly elevated from baseline. That was the complete visible record on their body of everything the previous 38 minutes had contained. They looked at the interior room. Then they looked at me. Before anything else. Before the administrative sequence that logic required. Before any of the things a person in their position was expected to prioritize. They crossed the room and looked at my hands, which were gripping the edge of the window shelf where the plant was sitting. "You're cold," they said. "Yes," I said. My voice was not doing what voices are supposed to do. Duran looked around the room. There was no blanket in the interior room. They turned, went back through the door, came back 40 seconds later with one from somewhere in the outer rooms. They put it around my shoulders with the matter-of-factness of someone completing a necessary task. No commentary, no performance of care. Just the action done completely because it needed doing. I stood in the blanket and looked at the plant. "How many?" I asked. 12, Duran said. They had understood the question without needing the clarification. 12 people came here for me. "Yes," they said. I did what I should not have done, what I was not professionally authorized to do at this range and this depth. I reached, without preparation, without the careful distance of the past 32 days, all the way to the surface of Cale Duran's lake. And the lake was still. Still and still and still. I had expected something else. Something that should be there after 38 minutes of what had just happened outside that door. Something elevated or shaken or hot with the specific texture of a person who has tested themselves at the limit and found themselves sufficient. There was none of that. There was only the stillness. And then very quiet, very far below one thing. Not satisfaction, not pride, not the self-directed relief of survival. The other kind. The relief of a person who had asked one specific question and received one specific answer. Not did I make it. The other question. I pulled back. I sat down on the floor of the interior room because the floor was there and it seemed like the right decision. Duran sat across from me without being asked. I do not know how long we stayed that way. Later, Duran filed the incident report and handled the station security team and processed every administrative requirement that followed what had happened that night. I signed the documents I was asked to sign and answered the questions I was asked to answer. At some point, I was back in the interior room, in the chair by the window shelf, with the blanket still around my shoulders. I fell asleep in the chair. When I woke, the door to the outer room was open. Duran was at the desk, reading something on a small screen, not asleep. I looked at the plant. 11 leaves. I had been so certain at some point during the counting that they had changed. The talks were suspended for 9 days. Station security conducted their review. Diplomats from 6 delegations submitted formal queries. The Human Coalition sent a representative to my suite who spoke for 40 minutes about accountability and partnership and the importance of collaborative security frameworks across species lines. I listened to all of it and thanked them for coming. Duran did not attend that meeting. I did not ask them to. The 9 days had a different quality from the first 32. Everything before had been structured. Events, sessions, receptions. Time divided into formal segments with defined content. Now there were just the hours, wide and unscheduled, and the two of us in the suite with no external agenda organizing the space between us. Durin maintained their routines. Morning circuit of the rooms, evening assessment of the outer corridor, meals at consistent times. They did all of this without commentary and without requiring acknowledgement for any of it. I found myself organizing my own schedule around the rhythm of theirs, not because I was asked to, because the rhythm was steady, and steady had become a resource I had not known I was short of. We ate together for the first time on the 3rd day. This was not an arranged thing. I was eating. Durin came in from the morning circuit and sat at the other side of the table and ate. We did not speak during the meal. This was not uncomfortable. Durin had a relationship with silence that was different from most species I had worked alongside. For most, silence is a gap that wants filling. For Durin, silence was simply the absence of a reason to speak, and they treated it accordingly. I began watching their hands. I noticed this on the 4th day and filed it under unclassifiable. Durin's hands were doing ordinary things, reading, eating, cleaning and checking their equipment with the same careful, habitual thoroughness they brought to everything, and I kept cataloging them. The way they held a cup, the way they turned a page, the contrast between the precision of the morning checks and the easy looseness of sitting quietly at a shared meal. I counted the plant's leaves once, in the interior room from a doorway. Still 11. On the 5th day, Durin was reading at the window. I was reviewing subcommittee documents I had already reviewed 3 times. The words were not landing. I put the documents down. "Do you enjoy it?" I asked. Durin did not look up from their reading. "Enjoy what?" "This work protecting people." A pause, not a thinking pause, a deciding pause. "No," they said. I waited. Durin kept reading. "Then what draws you to it?" "Nothing draws me to it," they said. "I am good at it." "Those are not the same thing." "No," they agreed. I looked at the documents I was not reading. Most people do the things they are good at because competence itself is a kind of pleasure. The skill becomes the reward. "I know," Durin said. "But not you." "Not me," they said. I sat with that. "Then why?" Durin looked up. There was something in the look that I had not seen before, not the still surface of the lake, something briefly below it, a view through clear water to a depth that was usually out of range. They looked back at their reading. Someone has to stand between you and everything that is trying to reach you, and I am. They stopped. "You are what?" I said. "I am not losing anything by being at the front," they said. The words were quiet. They arrived with the weight of something that had not been said out loud before, or had been said so many times in so many places that it had stopped being a confession and become simply the shape of a fact. I sat very still. "That is not true," I said. Durin looked up again. Their eyes had that color I still had no word for. "I know," they said, and went back to their reading. I watched their hands turning pages for a long time after that. Steady, untroubled, the hands of a person who had looked at a particular question and made their decision about it long before this room, this station, this conversation. On the 6th day, I reached again. Fully, not the careful professional touch of the early days, not the brief test at the surface. I went down deliberately, as far as the reach would take me. The lake was still all the way to the bottom, and at the bottom, exactly where I had first found it, the old load-bearing thing, cold and structured, ancient the way experience makes things ancient, not years. I went further. Under the cold foundation, I found the shape of it, not a wound exactly, a map that had been folded and refolded until the creases were permanent, every crease a specific placement, every placement a specific moment when the options had narrowed to one. I found 3 weights in the map, moments without names, presences that had been at Duran's back and then were not. The precise feeling of a person who has asked the same question in 3 different locations and received the same answer each time, and has stopped being surprised by the answer, and has built something stable out of that. I surfaced, sat in my chair, did not reach for my log. Some things resist being filed. On the 7th day, Duran made tea. I had not known they knew how to prepare Velkari tea. They did not announce this knowledge. They made it, placed a cup in front of me without comment, and returned to the window with their own coffee. I held the cup for a long time before drinking. Your file says you have had 6 prior protection assignments, I said. Yes, they said. All resolved successfully. Yes, they said. And after each one, you were reassigned. A pause. Yes, they said. Did you request that? A longer pause. No, they said. I drank the tea. It was correct, not approximately correct, exactly correct. The specific temperature and steeping duration that the Velkari preparation method requires. The kind of accuracy that comes from researching a thing before doing it, rather than attempting it and adjusting. I held the cup and thought about that. On the 8th day, the security review results came through. Duran took the communication in the secondary room. When they came back, their face had the closed quality of something being held in carefully. 12 individuals, they said. 4 separate hearing parties. The consortium was assembled specifically around the subcommittee vote. So the attempt failed in both directions, I said. Yes, they said. My vote carries more weight now than it did before they tried to remove it. Yes, they said. I looked at them. Are you concerned about the resumed talks? They considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. Should I be? I am asking if you are, I said. Duran looked at me. The thing at the bottom of the lake was briefly closer to the surface. No, they said, I am not. We sat in silence for a moment. You researched the tea, I said. Yes, they said. Before you arrived, you researched it then. Yes, they said. The 16 clauses were in the paperwork, I said, and you spent part of your preparation time learning the correct temperature for Velkari tea. The clauses were straightforward, Duran said. The tea required more attention. I looked at them for a long moment. Why? Duran looked back. You would be drinking it, they said. As if this were a complete explanation. It was a complete explanation. I put the cup down. I did not file it under unclassifiable. I did not file it anywhere. The talks resumed on the 10th day. We did not speak about the 9 days, not directly. The 9 days became the thing that existed between us and changed the geometry of everything else. Duran was still at my shoulder, 3 steps back, 1 to the right, but the distance had a different quality now, not in measurement. In what it meant. The subcommittee vote was held on the 17th day after the resumption. I voted as I had intended to vote since the 2nd week. The result shifted the resource rights framework significantly in a direction that most of the smaller outer reach parties had been working toward for years. Vorith looked at me across the session chamber when the result was announced. I looked back. They did not hold it long. The final accession certification was completed on the 47th day. Every party signed. Every signature was the result of weeks of specific grinding work. I had done this before. I knew how it felt when it finished. A particular quiet arrives. Not peace exactly. The absence of the noise that negotiation makes in the body. The station coordinator, a man named Owen, found me in the corridor after the signing. He shook my hand in the human way, pressing firmly and then releasing. You should be proud, he said. The process worked, I said. That is what being proud of it means, he said and walked away. I stood in the corridor and thought about that. Durin appeared from the left corridor. Execute assessment. I knew this because I now knew what Durin looked like when they were doing one, which was the same as Durin doing anything else, except that their eyes moved in a specific pattern. Done, they asked. Done, I said. They nodded. We walked back to the suite. The summons from the Velkari Queen Sovereign arrived 4 days after the accession certification was filed. I had expected it. The completion of the Outer Reach accession talks was a significant event. A formal audience with the Queen Sovereign following a successful negotiation is the standard conclusion to an assignment of this scale. I had attended 3 such audiences in my career. The addendum to the summons I had not expected. Standard protocol dictates that the diplomat attends a post-assignment audience with their formal attaché. Security personnel do not attend. The audience chamber is the most protected location in 3-star systems, and the protocols there are older and more thorough than anything a single guard detail provides. The addendum said, "Bring your protection detail." I read the addendum. Read it again. Showed it to Velsari, who read it twice and looked at me with an expression that very carefully did not contain whatever she was actually thinking. "Inform Sergeant Durin," I said. "Yes, diplomat," she said. The transit to Velkari Prime took 12 hours. I spent most of it reviewing the presentation I would give to the Queen Sovereign, the results of the accession talks, the treaty framework, the resource rights structure, the long record of a process that had arrived where it was supposed to arrive, and the reasons why. I sat across from Durin during the transit, reviewed my documents, did not look at them more than was normal. Durin spent the transit doing what Durin did, reading, checking their equipment, looking out the transport window at the space between stars with the same steady, focused attention they gave to everything that was in front of them. Once I looked up. They were looking at me. They looked back at the window. I returned to my documents. I did not note the look in my log. The audience chamber of the Velkari Queen Sovereign is one of the oldest continuously occupied spaces in the Outer Reach. The floor is polished obsidian, brought from the original home world before the migration. It reflects everything above it with a clarity that makes the room feel doubled. The walls are pale stone, old and even. The ceiling carries sound in a way that returns every footstep as a quiet echo, half a second after you take it, like a reminder of where you have just been. There were 41 people in the chamber when we entered. I know what a formal audience feels like. I know the specific quality of the attention of a room that is in ceremony. People watch, but they watch the way you watch a formal thing, with observance, not assessment. We walked in. The attention shifted. Not the observance kind. I did not need empathic reach to feel it. It moved through the room the way a change in pressure moves through a closed space. 41 people forming the shape of a single question. I walked the formal approach, took my position at the presentation point, said the formal opening words in the formal sequence. The Queen Sovereign listened. I had met her twice before. She was a small woman by Velkari standards, which means average-sized by most other measures. She had held the throne for 63 years. She wore that experience the way very capable people wear it, quietly, until something reveals it. She was watching Durin. Not constantly, not obviously, but I had spent 6 decades learning to track where a room's attention is directed without appearing to track it, and the Queen Sovereign's attention was moving, periodically, to the figure at my shoulder. She was watching with the specific expression of someone trying to place a thing that does not fit any category they currently have. I gave the full presentation. The figures, the framework, the treaty outcomes, the projections. I gave it as I always give a formal presentation, completely, clearly, in the correct order. When I finished, the customary silence settled. The Queen Sovereign looked at Durin. Then at me. Diplomat Savak, she said. The work is noted. The conclave is well served. My honor, I said. Then, in a tone quieter than the formal one. A tone with the specific weight of a question that is actually a question. Who guards you so fiercely? She asked. The chamber went very still. The kind of still that 41 people make when every one of them has decided not to move. I looked at the floor. The polished obsidian, the clear reflection in it, doubled below. Durin's reflection was there, 3 steps back, 1 to the right, doing the slow, careful inventory of the room, not looking at the Queen Sovereign, not looking at me, looking at the room because the room needed looking at, and that had not changed because we were standing in the most formal space in 3-star systems. Still doing the math. Still putting themselves at the front. I looked at the reflection for a moment, the still figure in the polished black floor, and something that had been building for 47 days without a name arrived, fully formed, before I had made the decision to let it. My human, I said. The chamber breathed. The one even warriors fear, I said. Very quiet after that, a silence with mass. The Queen Sovereign looked at Durin for a long moment. Durin met the look without turning away from the room. No bow. In Velkari court, you bow when the Queen Sovereign gives you sustained attention. You bow without being asked because not bowing is a statement and statements in the audience chamber require authorization. Durin met the look and held the scan of the room. There was no rudeness in it. I knew that now, after 47 days. Durin had entered this room and identified every point in it that required monitoring. The Queen Sovereign was not on that list because she was not a threat, and so Durin's eyes went where the threats might come from and stayed there, even while the most powerful person in 3-star systems was looking directly at them. The Queen Sovereign saw this. I watched her see it, the recognition moving across her face, slow and complete. Then she nodded. A single, measured movement, the kind of nod that is a full sentence and does not require the sentence to follow it. I see, she said. She looked back at me. The conclave will review the treaty framework with the full weight of the Queen Sovereign's endorsement, she said. This was the formal conclusion, the highest possible validation for a diplomatic outcome. In 63 years, I had received it twice. I gave the formal response, the correct words in the correct order. But I was looking at the floor, at the reflection in the obsidian. Durin had not moved, was not going to move until I moved, and perhaps not even then. The corridor after the audience was pale stone and long light. Our footsteps came back to us from the high ceiling in that doubled way, half a second behind, like the echo was following us at a small, polite distance. I did not speak for a while. I was doing what I do when something shifts, holding it carefully while it finds its position. The words I had said in the chamber were sitting somewhere between my chest and my throat and were not ready to be examined yet. They needed to settle. They needed to become the shape they were going to be. Durin walked beside me, not 3 steps back. Beside, the formal situation had concluded and they had recalibrated to the changed geometry without being asked. I looked at the floor. This corridor was lighter stone, not obsidian, and gave back no reflection. You almost smiled, I said. I do not know what you are referring to, Durin said. In the chamber floor, in the obsidian. The floor was uneven, Durin said. I looked at them. Their expression was exactly what it always was. The floor was perfectly level, I said. You would need to be a structural engineer to confirm that with certainty, they said. I looked back at the corridor ahead, the long pale light, the echo of our steps following behind us. The Queen recognized you, I said. She was looking at the room, Durin said. She was looking at you, I said, and then she looked at me and I said something. A pause. You did, Durin said. My human, I said. The words were quieter in this corridor than they had been in the chamber, more real somehow, less formal, as if removing them from the ceremony returned them to whatever they actually were. "I know what you said," Duran said. Their voice had the same flat delivery it always had, but underneath it, something I did not need empathic reach to catch. "Did you mind?" I asked. Duran was quiet for 3 steps. "No," they said. I nodded. "We walked." "I reached again," I said, "on the 6th night of the suspension, fully." "I know," Duran said. I looked at them. "You know." "I can tell when you are doing it," they said. No accusation in it, just the fact stated plainly. "You go very still, like you are listening for something at a distance." I thought about that. "You could feel it." "Not exactly," they said. "You simply become very quiet, different from your regular quiet." "And you never said anything." "You were not taking anything," Duran said. "You were looking. That is different." "And that did not bother you." Duran considered this. They were the only person I had encountered who treated the full weight of a question as something it had earned before being answered, regardless of how long the consideration required. "No," they said. "Why not?" "Because you were trying to understand me," they said. "That is not a violation. That is just wanting to know someone." I stopped walking. Duran stopped beside me. We stood in the pale corridor with the doubled echo of our stopped footsteps settling back into the quiet. "I found something," I said, "when I went to the bottom." "I know," they said. "The weights," I said, "the 3 placements." Duran's jaw was very still. "Owen," I said, "and Claire, and the one before Claire whose name I did not find." Duran did not move. "You went deep," they said. "Yes," I said, "I am sorry." "Do not be," they said. "They did not make it," I said. "No," they said. "And then the assignments continued." "Yes," they said. "And you continued." "Yes," they said. I stood in the corridor and held this. The map with the permanent creases. The question asked in 3 separate places and answered the same way each time. The structure built around that answer until it was load-bearing and the building could not stand without it. "That is why," I said. "That is the reason you gave me, that you are not losing anything by being at the front." Duran was quiet. "But that is not true," I said. "I said that to you before." "You did," they said. "And I am saying it again now," I said, "because it matters that it is not true." Duran looked at the corridor ahead, the long light, the pale stone walls that gave back no reflection. "It was true," they said, "for a long time." "Was," I said. They looked at me. "Was," I said again. Duran did not answer. But the lake, which I was not reaching for, and which was giving me nothing I had not come by honestly, moved. Not much. Not with any drama. A deep, slow shift, the way something very large and very settled moves when the conditions around it finally change. We started walking again. "When we return to the station," Duran said, "the security assessment of the residential block will need to be redone. The craft delegation changed quarters during the suspension period." "I know," I said. "And the subcommittee follow-up sessions begin in 6 days." "I know," I said. "And they said," and then stopped. "And I said." Duran looked at the floor, the pale corridor stone, no reflection, then back up. "I would like to learn more of the formal Valkyrie greeting conventions," they said, "for the follow-up sessions, so that I do not create a diplomatic problem by holding my position wrong in a room." I looked at them. "You are not holding your position wrong," I said. "The Queen Sovereign understood exactly what you were doing." "She is one person," Duran said. "Not every dignitary in the follow-up sessions will have her range of understanding." I thought about that. "No," I said, "they will not." "So I should learn," they said. "I can teach you," I said. "I was hoping you would say that," Duran said. We kept walking. The echo kept following us at its small, polite distance, half a second behind, step for step, all the way down the long corridor. And something that did not have a word in any language I knew kept finding its shape in the space between two people walking side by side on Velkari Prime, in the long light, with their footsteps arriving twice. The Velkari have 600 years of language. 600 years of words for everything we have ever needed to name. Words for the grief of a negotiation that ends without resolution. Words for the pride of surviving what others have not. Words for the specific feeling of being very far from the place you began and still being exactly where you are supposed to be. I have been turning this over for 6 days now, looking at it from every angle that 63 years of language gives me, holding it up against everything I have and finding it does not fit, not quite, not cleanly. It is not duty. Duty has a known texture and this is not it. It is not the Velkari concept of bonding, which is warm and mutual and builds over years of shared formal experience. It is not the human word I looked up in a translation index, which came close but arrived slightly to the left of the actual thing. It is something built in the space between a potted plant with 11 leaves and the long light of a corridor on Velkari Prime. Between the correct temperature of tea researched before a first meeting and a blanket produced from somewhere in the outer rooms at the 38th minute. Between a lake that is still all the way to the bottom and a voice that says please in exactly the register that means it. Between 3 steps back and 1 to the right, and then, when the ceremony is done, simply beside. Between a queen asking a question and an answer arriving before the decision to give it. My human. I will find the word. I have time. And for the first time in 63 years of this work, I am not in any hurry to reach the end of the assignment I am on.